Welcome to the debate. Today we're opening the historical record on two figures who absolutely shattered the ceiling of female authority. Queen Cleopatra VII of Egypt and Empress Zetian of China.
And they both achieved immense political power in systems that were fundamentally opposed to them. But their methods could not have been more different.
Exactly. And that brings us to our central question. Which approach really represents the superior achievement of female political power? Was it Cleopatra's radical, boundary-pushing, charismatic influence over the West? An influence defined by her ability to make the most powerful men in the world abandon their own institutions?
Or was it Zetian's institutionalized long-term imperial authority in the East, defined by her success in creating an entirely new dynasty under her own name?
I'm going to contend that Cleopatra's power built on sheer personal dominance, on the total subjugation of the world's greatest generals, embodies a truer, more immediate, and frankly, a more audacious form of radical female agency.
And I'll be arguing the opposite, that Zetian's achievement, establishing the Huangdi title for herself and controlling the vast Chinese bureaucratic structure for half a century, demonstrates a deeper, more enduring, and ultimately a superior form of political power.
Well, my core thesis is this. Cleopatra achieved power by making the giants of Rome, we're talking Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, willingly subordinate the greatest empire the world had ever seen to her will. This wasn't just, negotiation. This was a level of emotional and intellectual tyranny that no standard politician, male or female, could ever dream of. We see this right away in how she affects Antony. His own confidant laments that the triple pillar of the world was transformed into a strumpet's fool. He's sacrificing Rome for Alexandria. Antony himself declares that the nobleness of life is just embracing her. He's redefining political ambition away from conquest and towards a passion only she provides. Her infinite variety meant that age cannot wither her, nor custom stale. It secured her influence outside of time or tradition. And when she died, it was a self-directed act, choosing the high Roman fashion to avoid being paraded in Caesar's triumph, a final, total act of sovereignty.
See, that dramatic, self-aggrandizing end is precisely the failure point I want to focus on. I come at this from a completely different angle. Zetian's achievement as the sole female emperor, Huangdi, not queen, but Huangdi, who founded her own Zhou dynasty and ruled for nearly 50 years, is, I think, objectively superior. Her success was in fundamentally breaking the traditional male bureaucratic structure of imperial China, arguably the most deeply entrenched patriarchal system in the ancient world.
Okay.
And that distinction between queen and emperor is, it's everything here. Cleopatra was an heir of the Ptolemies. She was royalty by birthright, however constrained. Zetian seized the supreme title, Huangdi, a title intrinsically masculine, explicitly denied to women by Confucian law. And she did it through a decades-long strategy, using not just purges, but religious counter-orthodoxy, commissioning the Longmen grottos, exploiting Buddhist prophecy to formalize her power. Cleopatra's power was volatile. It was dependent on the life and loyalty of Roman men, and it led directly to Egypt's obliteration. Zetian, on the other hand, commanded a system that maintained stability and ensured her legacy was durable, institutional, and entirely her own.
I see why you prioritize the title and the longevity, but let me give you a different perspective on that. Zetian certainly captured a title, a piece of political nomenclature, fine. But Cleopatra achieved the total subjugation of men who held the tangible military power of the world. That, to me, is a far greater feat than bureaucratic control. You have Antony admitting his heart was to thy rudder tied by the strings, and that her beck might from the bidding of the gods command me. This emotional tyranny over the co-ruler of the Roman world, it demonstrates a level of personal dominance that no amount of civil service reform can really match.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the inherent fragility of that kind of power? Cleopatra's allure, however dazzling, her ship described as a burnished throne, it was fundamentally borrowed. It was temporary. It was transactional. It relied on a continuous chain of Roman protectors, and it failed the moment Antony was defeated. Antony's own men despised her influence, calling her a gypsy. And this instability led directly to Actium, where Antony betrayed his own experience, manhood, honor by following her fleeing ships. She had no institutional defense, only personal appeal. And when that failed, Egypt fell. Wu Zetian, by contrast, endured through institutional competence. She reformed the civil service, established meritocracy, and achieved stability for a vast empire, defying the powerful Confucian elite through sheer good governance.
But surely we have to weigh the methods used to get that longevity. Wu Zetian's control required constant, brutal internal purges. Her rule is forever colored by calculated cruelty. The alleged murder of her own infant daughter to secure the empress title, the cleansing of the Li imperial family. I mean, while this might show political shrewdness, it means becoming the very monster that later historians labeled her. Cleopatra's flaws, on the other hand, were sort of folded into her mystique. They were celebrated. Whom everything becomes, to chide, to laugh, to weep. Her drama, her imperfection, that was her power. Wu Zetian fought enemies inside the palace. Cleopatra took on the giants of global politics. That seems far more audacious.
I'm just not convinced that dramatic impact is superior to systemic control. Let me tell you why the brutality of Wu Zetian was functionally necessary, which actually makes her achievement greater. She didn't inherit a semi-divine Hellenistic monarchy. She had to dismantle and then rebuild the political machinery of Tang China, which was based on the absolute ideological constraint of Confucianism, a system that explicitly dictated women should not speak of external affairs. This wasn't a social custom, it was the philosophical backbone of the state.
Right.
She had to climb from being a low-ranking consort, seize the male Huangdi title, and then construct a parallel system of legitimacy. And this is where the religious maneuvering becomes so crucial. She didn't just commission some statues. She used Buddhism, specifically the prophecy of the Maitreya Buddha, to reposition herself as a divinely ordained reincarnation, a figure who transcends gender. She used this new spiritual orthodoxy to justify her physical takeover of the Confucian state. Her ruthlessness wasn't just impulse, it was a calculated necessity born from institutional resistance. She was fighting the entire ideological foundation of an empire.
That's an interesting point on the ideological fight, though I would frame it differently. While Wu Zetian faced institutional walls, the cost of breaching them was a legacy forever tainted by tyranny. Longevity isn't superiority if it means mass purges and being forever labeled a calamity. The historical accounts, written by the very people she suppressed, ensure her story is told through the lens of a necessary evil at best. Cleopatra, through her immediate, dramatic, mythological suicide, she avoided that. She achieved a legendary status tragedy and heroism that Wu Zetian, who was forced into abdication and died peacefully, simply could not claim. Cleopatra achieved myth. Wu Zetian achieved administration.
But if the goal of political power is to effectively govern, then administration is precisely what matters. Cleopatra's system dissolved the moment Antony died. Her power led to the colonization of her own country. Wu Zetian's institutional foundation allowed her to successfully reform the civil service, manage a vast empire, and maintain military stability. She governed through policy, bureaucracy, meritocracy. Her success forced subsequent male emperors to acknowledge her achievements, even if grudgingly.
Let's look at this through a more modern lens of agency. Cleopatra challenged all social and military conventions, directly and publicly. She demanded to fight at Actium, famously saying, "I will not stay behind." She showed that a woman could be a political and military equal, even wearing Antony's sword. This visible confrontational feminism, her disdain for Octavia's still conversation and modest eyes, It makes her a far more compelling figure for understanding raw, unconstrained agency that confronts patriarchal structures head-on.
I think that's an interesting take, but it still centers on her personal drama and, critically, her allure. Her power was almost entirely defined by her sexuality. She was the serpent of Old Nile, a royal wench. Wu Zetian's tower transcended gender roles entirely by literally assuming the ultimate male title, Huangdi, and demonstrating competence in areas completely unrelated to charm, governance, reform, military strategy. When Caesar's messenger approaches Cleopatra, she performs subservience, saying she's ready to lay white crown at his feet. Wu Zetian's entire achievement was eliminating the need for that kind of charm or gender performance by proving a female emperor could manage the state better than any man. She governed through merit, Cleopatra charmed through seduction and high tragedy.
I think it was a final, strategic move before her suicide, a refusal to give Caesar the satisfaction. She chose death to preserve her own narrative and autonomy. Wu Zetian, for all her strength, was ultimately forced into abdication. Cleopatra chose the timing and nature of her own exit, which is the ultimate act of self-sovereignty. She proved personal will could overcome the greatest systemic force in the West.
But the long-term impact of Wu Zetian's rule just can't be understated. Her ability to survive and thrive within the world's most ideologically restrictive system for nearly 50 years, not just as a queen, but as an emperor, fundamentally altered the perception of female capability in Chinese governance. That is systemic change. Cleopatra's reign, for all its dazzling charisma, proved only that one woman could briefly distract powerful men, leading to the collapse of her country.
Ultimately, I maintain that Cleopatra's historical significance lies in her unique, unrepeatable ability to make Roman ambition bend entirely to Egyptian desire. Her control over Antony was total, proving that charismatic, personal agency can reshape world history more profoundly and immediately than any imperial title. She was, as the Romans feared, the serpent of Old Nile, a title of mythological potency that echoes even today.
And I conclude that Wu Zetian's establishment of the Huangdi title and her long reign represents the creation of a durable institutional form of female power. It demanded respect from future historians and ensured her legacy was built not on a volatile alliance, but on absolute centralized sovereignty that fundamentally reshaped an empire. She proved that a woman could not only govern, but actively reform the very mechanisms of power.
Both figures, they both utilized ruthlessness, profound wisdom, and extraordinary strategy to achieve power in worlds dominated by men. And it leaves us with this really complex understanding of what constitutes true greatness in female leadership.
It really does. It forces us to ask whether the greatest achievement is to master the system through influence or to break and rebuild that system through title and lasting institutional authority. We invite you to consider the evidence. Which of these rulers, the charismatic fire or the institutional bedrock, commands your ultimate allegiance? Let us know what you think.
We'll return next week to explore another crucial debate hidden within the source material.